My entitled neighbor tried to break into my house and steal my grandma's heirlooms, so I got him imprisoned and had his kids taken away. When my grandmother passed away, her house was inherited by my father, who passed away just 3 days later after being hit by a drunk driver. The house went to me, and on my first day after moving in, my neighbor Todd showed up with his 2 young kids. As soon as I opened the door, he started interrogating me about why he and his kids weren't invited to my grandma's funeral. Before I could respond, he demanded that I give him a copy of her will. According to him, his kids were like family to her and should get whatever heirlooms they wanted. With that, his kids ran past him and into the house, then started rummaging through drawers. His daughter stumbled upon a ring that had been passed down 3 generations and was set to go to my aunt. She put it on. I told Todd to get her to take the ring off, but he refused. He insisted again that his kids were like family to her, but I yelled that Grandma hated them. They were entitled and did whatever they liked, even ruining her lawn with dog poop. I threatened to call the cops unless his daughter took the ring off, and that's what made him listen. His daughter screamed she didn't want to and even hit Todd, but the ring eventually came off. As he left, he yelled that this wasn't finished and that he'd get his heirlooms in the end. He wasn't lying when he said this wasn't finished. In the following days, he started dropping by unannounced. He found every excuse to bring up the will, his kids, or what he thought Grandma would have wanted. He had the nerve to act as though his kids were the rightful heirs and often threw guilt trips about how much they loved her and how devastated they were not to have a piece of her memory. It was all nonsense. One evening, after a really draining day of sorting through my father's things, I came home to find Todd standing on my front porch with a box of donuts. He had a grin on his face that made my skin crawl. Before I could even ask what he was doing there, he launched into some story about how his daughter had cried herself to sleep, heartbroken over not getting anything of Grandma's stuff. He ended his speech by offering me a donut. He went on to say that he wanted to talk neighbor to neighbor. I flat out told him that neither he nor his kids were getting anything. We'd already been through this. I walked past him and left the donuts on the porch, leaving him looking dumbfounded. He didn't say anything as I closed the door, but I could feel his eyes on me through the window for far too long before he finally walked away. Things quieted down for a few days after that, and I started to think maybe Todd had finally gotten the message. About a week later, I came home from running errands and found Todd and his 2 kids at my front door. His son was standing there trying to pick the lock with a screwdriver while Todd stood behind him coaching as if this was some kind of life lesson. It took me a second to even register what I was seeing, and then I lost it. I shouted at them as I ran up to the doorway. Todd turned around and looked startled for maybe half a second before his face slipped into an irritating fake smile. He tried to calm me down and told me it wasn't what it looked like. He said my door was stuck and that they thought they could help me out. I told him yeah, it was stuck by a lock to keep people like you out. His son dropped the screwdriver, and Todd's daughter shrank behind him, but Todd just kept smiling as if this was all one big misunderstanding. He told me there was no need to call the cops and that it was just a mistake. I'd have to have "idiot" written across my forehead if I thought I was buying that for a second. I kicked him and his little hoodlums off my property and told them if they pulled that stunt again I'd call the cops. He opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't about to let him get another word in. I pulled out my phone and hovered my finger over the call button, which seemed to do the trick. Todd threw his hands up in mock surrender and left just as quickly as they had come. I stood there for a long time after they were gone. My heart was still racing. I knew I should have called the police right then and there, but something stopped me, maybe exhaustion? Against my better judgment, I let it go. A few days later, I noticed something was off. I had been slowly packing up boxes in the garage and storing away sentimental things that I wasn't ready to go through yet. One afternoon, when I went to grab a few boxes to bring inside, that's when I realized several of them were missing. My grandmother's old photos, letters, and even some of the jewelry she had given me, all of it was gone. I knew it was Todd. Who else would have the audacity to break into my garage and steal from me? But with no proof, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't exactly storm over to his house demanding my things back. So I did the only thing I could, filed a police report. The cops came, took down my statement and told me there wasn't much they could do without proof. It felt like a slap in the face. I was beyond pissed, but there was nothing more I could do at that moment. The next day, of course, I confronted Todd while he was watering his lawn and demanded to know if he had taken my stuff. He just looked at me with that same smug smile and denied everything. I told him that I knew it was him because he was the only one who knew about there being valuables in the house. Think about it. If a burglar came in the middle of the night, why would he break into the garage and leave the rest of the house untouched? He denied the accusation with a smile. His smile paired with denying reality made me hot with anger. Knowing I wouldn't get far this way, I told him I'd pay him just to get back Grandma's photos. He could keep anything else of value in there, but those photos were all I had left of her. His eyes showed remorse, but his mouth told me he was sorry for my loss, but it wasn't him who stole them. He blamed one of my friends who helped me move in. My blood boiled at this point. If I'd stayed there any longer, bad things would have happened. Todd wasn't going to admit anything without proof, so instead of confronting him again directly, I installed cameras. It took me a few days to set everything up properly, but once those cameras were in place, I felt a little bit of relief knowing if Todd or his brats tried anything again, I'd have proof. It was early evening when I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened it, there stood Todd's kids, his son all wide-eyed and hopeful, while his daughter stood behind him looking bored. The boy bounced a little on his toes, saying their dad had told him I should come over for dinner that night. Staring at him incredulously, the last thing I wanted was to sit down for dinner with someone who had been trying so hard to steal from me for weeks. I told him politely that I was busy, but before closing the door he yelled, "But we're family." He really laid it on thick. The kid practically bounced in excitement like this was some grand invitation. He said Grandma would want us all together. My heart tightened at hearing family. My grandmother had never considered these kids family. Yet Jason wasn't going to let it go. Grabbing Sarah's hand, yanking her forward, begging repeatedly while she rolled her eyes, clearly uninterested in playing along. "Yeah, whatever," she muttered, not even bothering making eye contact with me. An overwhelming feeling washed over me. I suspected Todd might be up something again. The thought of sitting at dinner table with him made me want slam door right back in their faces, but those kids were only doing what their father instructed them. I guess couldn't fault them for wanting their dad happy. Jason leaned closer, batting those big eyes, saying, "Please, it'll make Dad so happy." I should have said no. I really wanted to. But somehow words didn't come out. Instead agreed, saying I'd stay just for dinner but not long. Jason cheered, grabbing Sarah's hand, pulling her back toward their house. When arrived at Todd's place, the smell of something roasting filled air. Todd greeted like nothing ever happened between us, still plastered smile plastered across face, far too cheerful for liking. But sat down table anyway, while Sarah slouched chair, barely paying attention as Jason ran around helping set table like it were life's mission. As we sat down, Todd excused himself, going kitchen finish meal. I dug into plate when noticed Sarah glancing between me, then her own plate, fidgeting, biting lip before switching plates quickly. I caught it asking, "What are you doing?" She shrugged, saying it was nothing before could say anything else. Todd called from kitchen asking if we were ready to eat. Jason already halfway through food while Sarah sat staring at plate she just switched. Just then, as Todd walked back into room, Sarah's plate slipped from hands, crashing floor, scattering food everywhere. Todd rushed over frowning while Sarah said she'd go get another plate, walking toward kitchen while Todd cleaned mess. That night, I reviewed footage from security cameras. Todd and kids climbed over fence, broke into shed, rummaging through belongings, even trying start bonfire, old photo albums. I'd had enough playing nice. I called police again, this time having proof. When officers arrived, showed them footage. They finally took seriously. Todd tried playing off another misunderstanding, claiming kids just cleaning up after teenagers' trashed yard. But police weren't buying it this time, warning stay off property or face legal consequences. Thought would be end. Todd caught red-handed, police finally stepped in. A few days later came home finding "for sale" sign planted front yard. At first thought prank, until saw Todd standing there talking, couple showing them house. Marched right up asking what thought doing, grinning not least bit ashamed, saying just helping out, figured could use new owners since seemed overwhelmed work paperwork. Using excuse I'd given nights before against me, but wasn't about argue anymore. I yanked sign ground, calling police again, issuing formal warning telling Todd stay off property or face serious charges. Of course, he didn't listen. A few days later woke up finding car vandalized, tires slashed, windows smashed. Nightmare, didn't need check cameras, know who responsible. Called police. They took report, reviewing security footage, no doubt about it. Todd and kids caught red-handed sneaking onto property, dead night, vandalizing car. This time, Todd arrested, hauled away, shouting how house should been his, how no right, hogging all myself. With finally behind bars, kids left without guardian, mother out, picture years placed foster care. Felt bad about kids, almost considered taking them myself. Not fault dad raising wrong, now system life would be 12 times worse. But neighborhood quiet, first time forever, felt weight lift shoulders watching drive away. It's over, nightmare finally over.